Thank you. As I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted about 2.5 months ago. In fact, I might even go back to the start of where my remarks would have been. I won't retrace my steps through all of my previous remarks, but let's take it afresh as if this is a new contribution. So, the Construction Industry Training Fund bill that we're dealing with today, a bill to amend the Construction Industry Training Fund Act, an act where the former Liberal government, under the stewardship of former Minister for Innovation and Skills, the Honourable David Pisoni, did some important work in improving the operations of this bill some years ago, and indeed ensuring that the Construction Industry Training Fund and the board were operating to an improved regime. So, coming to government, the new government undertook an independent review of the Act. PEG Consulting, led by Tanya Donaghy and Ingrid Haythorpe, well known to the Parliament, they did this review and they released their report. I'm already underway. So as the lead speaker, I think I've got a little bit more than 13 minutes if needed, sir.
14. Did they actually take some time off from last time you spoke?
Lead speaker, sir.
Oh, sorry, we weren't aware that you're lead speaker. Sorry. Yes, you have. You have
yes, sorry, time. Before I so rudely interrupted myself, yes, no, the issues paper. They had the issues paper in December 2022. I think if people want to hear from the start, we can do that. I'll continue despite the barracking from the side. Thank you, sir. So there were 45 submissions from stakeholders, and in indicating that the opposition has considered and taken the opportunity to consult with stakeholders in the several months since we were last here talking about it, we did also have a look at some of the submissions from stakeholders. There were 45. Minister Boyer has indicated that 30 of the review's 31 recommendations will be implemented if this bill is implemented in full. The Minister also advised the remaining recommendation to investigate an alternative, more robust collection mechanism for the levy will be delayed 3 years pending evaluation of other reforms that this bill introduces. As I said, the former Liberal government was successful in implementing significant reforms to bring this Act into line with equivalent legislation in other states and territories, and also legislation governing the appointment of boards in the state's education and training sector. The Construction Industry Training Fund Board Amendment Bill 2018 supported training growth across industry and modernised the process for appointments to the Construction Industry Training Board. Indeed, this bill is seeking to reverse some of those reforms to lock in the appointment of a higher number of union representatives than is currently the state of affairs. For members who aren't aware, the board is responsible for managing and expending funds raised through the Construction Industry Training Levy to improve the quality of training in the industry and to coordinate industry-based training. In my last speech, I did particularly identify some of the members of the board and thank them for their service, and I reiterate that thanks. The work that the board has done over a number of years has been tremendously important in serving both the sector and also the young people considering a future employment pathway and a career in the sector. It's tremendously important work. In the CITB's annual training plan, the projected revenue collection across industry sectors, the housing, commercial and civil, for the financial year 23 is $29.8 million. And indeed, it's not a bad read. I encourage members to have a look. It's a fairly well surmised summary. So, I thank the Minister's Office for the briefing, and indeed also the Office of the Honourable David Pisoni, which includes some strong expertise in this area from time in government, and particular thanks to Kim Meyer for advice along the way. I also want to express thanks to some of the industry stakeholders who have had input into the opposition's point of view on this, particularly Matt Lowe and Group Training Australia, the Apprentice Employment Network. Thank Greg Bassani and ATEC. I thank Amanda Grocock from the Master Landscapers Association. I thank Daniel Palumbo from the Urban Development Institute. Will Frogley from Master Builders, and indeed Stephen Knight from the Housing Industry Association. All of those stakeholders have either provided new submissions or identified that their points of view contained in their public submissions were still accurate, and indeed assisted the opposition. I thank also all of those who've taken the time to have a chat with me about this matter. The objectives of the bill we're dealing with include, as I mentioned, changing the composition of the board, mandating the appointment of 4 employee representatives and 4 employer representatives following consultation with key organisations. And just to put that into context, the current Act, at clause 5 from memory, talks about appointments by the Governor on the nomination of the Minister of one person to be the presiding member of the board, at least 4 but not more than 8 persons who have knowledge of and experience or expertise in the building and construction industry, and 2 persons who are, in the opinion of the Minister, independent of the building industry. The Minister must, in nominating people, seek to ensure that at least 1 person is nominated to represent the interests of employers in the building and construction industry, and at least 1 person is nominated to represent the interests of employees in the building and construction industry. And then there's a range of other factors, but basically that's the composition of the board. There's a flexibility to enable a skills base to be developed that serves the industry, serves the needs of employees well, without having it devolve into a series of appointments for unions and indeed employer organisations for that matter, just to have their professional board attenders being part of the arrangement. So I foreshadowed that the opposition will be moving amendments to this aspect. We have 2 amendments that we'll be moving during the committee stage of debate. The first is to oppose the clause. And we do believe that the clause that changes the composition of the board does not add value to the bill, does not assist in ensuring that there is good governance for the Construction Industry Training Fund, and does not enable South Australia's construction sector to be best supported in this manner going forward. I think if we're seeking to get outcomes, we want to provide more flexibility to the Minister to get great representation rather than just finding an opportunity to bulk up by 400% the union membership on the board. So if that amendment isn't going to get the government's support, we also have a second amendment that we'll be seeking to move, highlighting the particularly damaging impact that the CFMEU has had on this sector. We discussed in Parliament today the damaging impact that CFMEU has on relations between labour and capital in this state. We saw today and heard from the Premier his case that he doesn't support in any sense the way that John Setka and those sorts of operatives in the CFMEU go about their business. We've heard from the Minister for Mines in his response in question time today the horror that he identifies upon seeing revelations of connections between CFMEU figures and bikie gangs. The idea that organised crime is able to, for its own, and people involved in that, for their own purposes, are able to take union members' funds and use the power that comes with their position for their own personal benefit is appalling. So I think it's only reasonable for the government to back up their rhetoric with support for that amendment. Even if they wish to still have the 4 union representatives on the board, I trust that the government will take seriously the rhetoric that their minister, that their premier said in the House today, and will support this opposition amendment to remove any possibility of an appointment of a CFMEU representative on the board. I think that this is a very simple ask, frankly, and I look forward to the government's support when we get to that committee stage. And, of course, they also have the option of retaining the existing board structure as well. So, that said, we also heard feedback from a range of those people that I've spoken about that they indeed liked a number of the pieces of reform in the bill, and certainly my comments on a number of the other reforms are in the positive. I think that there are some reforms here that are the natural successors to the work done by the member for Unley in 2018, and we're very supportive of those other reforms. So we'll move our amendments when we get to the board composition, but I highlight some of the other changes appear to be certainly things that have been sought by industry, by businesses, by representatives of staff and indeed of industry groups. So some of those include increasing the project value threshold at which the levy is payable from $40,000 to $100,000 through regulations, allowing the Minister to present the Board with an annual statement of the Government's priorities, establishing a cross-sector planning committee to advise the Board on issues that impact the industry as a whole. The bill also enables members on this new committee to make claims and seek financial reimbursements. So potentially there's some increased payments there, but hopefully these people will do good work. The bill reduces the Minister's oversight and approval of payments to board members and committee members, but one hopes the administrative efficiencies will outweigh any risk there. It enables the allocation of monies from the fund for the purposes of workforce attraction and retention activities. It changes the Board's financial and operating reporting from a financial to a calendar year, and streamlines reimbursement of expenses incurred by Board members, formalises the ability of Board to engage staff or services of the public service under an arrangement agreed with the relevant Minister, and indeed there's a mandate for the review of the operation of the Act following its 5th anniversary. The bill does not change the current 0.25% levy rate, consistent with the review's recommendations. We heard from stakeholders who viewed the application of the GST to the calculation of a project's value as a tax on tax. Accordingly, the bill removes GST from the calculation of a project's cost, resulting in a reduction in the amount of levy payable for all project owners. Under the current Act, the levy is not payable on certain projects. Exemptions and exclusions are contained in the Act, including on main or core turbines or generators to be installed at power stations involved in the generation of electricity for the state's power systems, works associated with any operation under the Petroleum and Geothermal Energy Act, the Petroleum Submerged Lands Act, the Mining Act and the Open Mining Act. The review considered the exemptions in the Act and whether they remained relevant and appropriate. Exemptions for power generation and works performed by self-employed people in industries outside of building and construction did not meet the test of relevance or appropriateness and should be removed, as suggested. The Government's accepted this approach and will proceed with these reforms, is my understanding. The review also recommended the exemption for mining and petroleum works be reviewed, and we understand the Government's decided not to proceed with that course of action at this stage. We discussed the Board composition already, so I won't repeat myself there. And I do, however, remind people in relation to the legislation that was approved in 2019, that also included the presiding member being entitled to vote, including always having a casting vote in Board proceedings. The Board, comprising up to 8 industry representatives who are nominated by the Minister following a public expression of interest process, as well as 2 independent members, a removal of the veto voting provisions to enable decisions of the Board to reflect a majority position, not the majority position of prescribed sectional interests. The point I would make is that while most of the measures in the bill were broadly supported by stakeholders who responded, some of them did take objection to the measures in relating to the composition of the Board. The Liberal Party has listened to those stakeholders. The Liberal Party has also identified that the particular sectional interests being sought to be expanded under the changes in the Board composition are not in the interests of the South Australian people, and noting the particular changes made in the Federal Parliament recently related to the CFMEU, noting the strong rhetoric from the Labor government in relation to the damage caused to public confidence in the union movement by the CFMEU and their behaviour, noting the strong language used by the Premier and the Minister for Energy in relation to their disapproval of the actions of operatives of the CFMEU. We look forward to the government's support for that amendment at least. I commend the bill to the House otherwise.